Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 3 of the Horizon League 1 series as we continue to sort of grapple with a year like we've never really encountered inside college athletics and beyond. I'm Will Haskett and proud to be part of the Horizon League family and helping to continue these great conversations as we have all summer. If you've been up to speed with all of our panel discussions to this point, we covered really the mental health and the anxiety relating around the COVID-19 pandemic in part 2 of this series. And we're going to continue that discussion, not just with student athlete well-being and student well-being, but then also this great unknown that is transitioning back into college. And I want to preface this by saying that by the time we recorded this and then decided to put it out there, things are changing on a minute-by-minute basis. And so some of the information that we didn't have at the time of recording, you may have in your hands right now. But what we're trying to do here today is to provide you with as much of a broad understanding of what institutions around the Horizon League are doing to make sure that our student athletes and our students from a broader standpoint are getting the support that they need, the information that they need, and that we are going to be in the safest possible environment to hopefully get back to as close to a competitive platform as possible. So with that, I'd like to introduce our great panel for this series discussion. First, Ora Peskovitz, who is the president at Oakland University. I can imagine has several meetings on her calendar every day trying to get an entire school back up. Hello, Madam President.
Thank you so much, Will. I'm delighted to be here with this wonderful panel.
Maxine Moore is a rising junior and a member of the women's basketball team at Detroit Mercy. Hi, Maxine.
Hi, how are you guys doing? Thanks for having me on.
Doing great. Allison Newland works at Wright State. She is a clinical counselor at Wright State and the liaison to the athletic department. Hi, Allison.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Susie Johnson, head volleyball coach at Milwaukee. Hello, coach.
Hi, happy to be here.
And Tyler Jones, who's the Deputy Director of Athletics for External Operations at Cleveland State and one heck of a student athlete in his day. Hi, Tyler.
Hello, thrilled to be here.
All right, let's get right into the conversation as it relates to transitioning back into school. And I think there's no better way to start than with the president of a university. So President Peskovitz, when you are thinking about this idea of transitioning and students wanting to get back, and some students may be a little bit apprehensive when it comes to getting back, just the logistical nightmare, I guess you could almost say, of trying to weather through this storm to open our schools back to students. Where do we stand, and how have you tried to approach this situation?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the question and the opportunity, Will. And first of all, I'll just say that I'm not only a president, I happen to also be a physician, a mother, and a grandmother. So I'll approach it from the perspective of all of those positions, and I'll try to represent all the presidents of the Horizon League when I say that we know how excited our students and our student athletes are to come back this fall. But having said that, I would say that I think it's fair to represent all of the universities when I say that our number one concern, and this year in particular, is really the health and safety of all of our students. And in particular, right now, we're thinking about our student athletes. And that's because we know that we can't have a great educational experience and a great athletic experience if it isn't safe and healthy to come to school this fall. So as we're preparing our campuses for this fall experience, we're really attending carefully to what is going to make it healthy and safe for all of our students to come back to study and to have a great competitive athletic experience this fall. And you alluded to the fact that I'm in a lot of meetings about that. You're right. We're working 24/7, and as the situation is constantly changing, to try to ensure that everything about our campuses and the athletic experience is going to be safe for our students.
If I could follow up on that too, what is your primary concern? And then what have you heard from constituents in terms of their concerns? Do those sort of match, or how are you trying to sort of marry those different sort of approaches as people try and figure out what this landscape is going to look like?
Yeah, well, I think the number one concern that we have, of course, is about the COVID virus. And while we're not as concerned about our own student population getting infected or coming with infections, it's about the spread of the virus, because We know that the student population is a little bit less at risk from the consequences of the virus, but the spread of the infection is really quite horrific. And first of all, the students themselves are not completely immune. I mean, while they are at less risk than the older population, they are not free from risk. And so while many students in our student population think that they're invincible, that's not really true. But what is true is that they can carry and spread this infection, even if they are asymptomatic, to people that they care about. And that includes our coaches, our faculty, and of course, they can take it back out into the community and spread it widely where people are at great risk. And this is what we're very much afraid of. And the consequences of that are that they will close down our athletic programs, our universities, and really harm people in the community to the point of death. And that's actually what we're seeing right now, which is a resurgence of the virus when we had actually gotten this under some control in the late spring. And so that's what we're afraid of. And many of us fear that most of the Horizon League schools that had been planning to be open, at least in a hybrid way, this fall, there is a concern that we have right now that we may not be able to be open, or that our athletic programs are at some risk. And so it is really important that all of us adhere to all of the mitigation measures that each one of our schools is putting in place right now.
Yeah, the broader picture in terms of people understanding what the trickle effect, or the ripple effect, I guess I would say, of how that would be. And that ripple effect, as you sort of alluded to, then transitions us into athletic departments. And while the schools have an entire student population to be worried about when it comes to competition, locker rooms, all of the shared spaces, what competition is going to look like, Tyler, I can imagine you're probably following along with a lot of what the higher administration is sort of saying, and then talking to your peers. So how does an athletic department then take all this information and try and figure out operationally what things are going to look like as student athletes hopefully start to trickle back onto campus?
Yeah, great question. And for us, it's a somewhat of a multi-phase approach. The pillars are health and safety, right? Making sure that our facilities are safe, and also our education and training component. So once our spaces are safe, training our staff to welcome back our student athletes is really, really important. And then from that perspective, how are we communicating those things to our key constituents? So a multi-phase approach, very similar to Madam President's approach there, is that the education is important, training is paramount, and then the health and safety of our facility is important.
And it's obviously evolving so rapidly too. And this is why it's so important, I think, Tyler, to have that sort of central plan in place. How are you trying to adapt as quickly as possible to all the information and the news as we get closer and closer to hopefully reopening?
As we all know, it's a moving target. Things are changing by the hour, let alone by the day. So for us, we're diligent in communicating with our folks on campus, our health providers, and our partners. But again, it's a moving target, and we only get one shot at this. So we have to be diligent and very patient and not rush the process.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I think a big part of it is all of us sitting on this panel right now, I would like to consider ourselves highly educated when it comes to what is going on around us. We're paying attention. We have responsibilities to be able to pay attention to it, but we know that the populations are going to be coming back together, may have different levels of understanding or education as it comes to the realities that they are going to be living in. And Maxine, I think that segues perfectly to you in that, what are the conversations you've had with teammates that are either close to campus or afar, other student athletes or student friends, and how different things might truly be in terms of those expectations of coming back onto campus?
Yeah, great question. I've talked to a few of my teammates at Detroit Mercy, and I have lots of student athlete friends that go to different schools across the nation. And, you know, a question that comes up a lot is testing. Like, how often are we going to be tested? Is it an everyday thing? Is it at the beginning of the week or at the end of the week? How testing will be done. We're finding out that, you know, there's different types of tests. There's the nose swab, there's the blood sample, there's the urine sample. Like, which one would we be required to do? would we be in a bubble? Like, I know some student athletes are returning to campus this week, next week, very soon here in July. And, are they going to be required to live in a bubble, go straight to workouts and practice and then go back to their apartment or dorm or whatever their living situation may be, and kind of just go to and fro, and that's pretty much it. I know some people are not opposed to this approach. Some people just want to get back on campus and get back to doing what they do. And so some people, would rather not be in a bubble. I've heard, kind of a 50-50 opinion. And then once we get back into full swing and, we're talking about playing games and, non-conference or conference, how is travel going to work? Milwaukee is a long drive for us. Green Bay is a far drive for us. And then we've got new schools added to the conference that we've never traveled to. So, are we looking at still taking charter planes or, strictly bus? That's been another question that some of my fellow student athletes have. And also, fans or no fans. I mean, we're thinking it's probably going to be no fans at this point, which is fine. A lot of people just want to play and compete and lay it all on the line for their program. So those are the big questions. And also, would we have to wear masks while we're practicing? 3-hour practice with a mask on is going to be tough, but we're willing to do it if that's what needs to be done. And so those are a few of the concerns and questions that some of my fellow athletes have.
And when you bring up those questions, Maxine, they're all great, valid questions that I think every student athlete has. And one thing that, unfortunately, I want to make clear right here is that we can't provide specific answers in this forum to every individual student athlete coming in, because this is so nuanced to whichever school you might be a part of. And that's what I think makes it truly hard from a league standpoint or an NCAA standpoint, is that there isn't one set of rules and guidelines that you can blanket cover everybody with. So the hope here today is to establish A, ways to sort of cope with that uncertainty, and then B, for those specifically wanting answers as it relates to their individual spot, arm you with the ability to go and find those answers and get the answers to those questions. And so, Susie, I'll bring you in from a coaching standpoint. It's where all of a sudden you've gone from summer after summer of worrying about the logistics of getting ready to compete to worried about the logistics of logistical communication with your team. How important is it right now to manage those student expectations, and what are you seeing that needs to be effective in doing so?
Well, it's been incredible the last 4 months, the communication and how it shifted from focusing on winning and graduating to this. And, we started from a very, very early stage in communication. It was just a clear, consistent message. When I get information, I'll give it to you. And, student athletes are used to being very busy, very focused, goal driven. Everything is a time. We do everything for that season that we prepare for. So when your world changes, you're growing up really fast. But one of the things that I have really sent a clear, consistent message on is, what is this? What do we want to look like when we get out of this? What do you want to be known for? What do you, some of those ideas are, I think you're building incredible resilience. And sometimes that comes later in life. And so we've really tried to, focus on that, because they want to know. And I don't know. I don't have the answers, but we're sticking together, communicating a lot, trying to just make sure to learn to have patience. In my meetings, that comes a lot up, and that word comes up a lot in my meetings.
Yeah. And Tyler, if I could bring you back in really quickly too, if you had a message to your student athletes in terms of where they should be getting their information from, because I think that right now is a critical question right now in all of this. I know, again, you can only speak to a Cleveland State standpoint, but I think a lot of student athletes would just sort of like to know, what should they be looking out to in terms of having that point of contact, and what should departments be doing to make sure they have that point of contact?
That's a great question, and that's something that we manage quite frequently here at Cleveland State. We're fortunate. Our president is phenomenal. He hosts town hall meetings weekly on Facebook. So we really encourage our student athletes to engage with our president during town hall meetings. In addition to that, we have weekly team meetings or myself or our AD Scott Garrett would hop on to answer whatever questions that maybe a coach may have or a student athlete. So for us, it's truly trying to gather your information from the same source, right? Because a particular state may be completely different than our state, right? So if we have a student athlete that maybe resides in Florida, and taking information from their governor could be completely different from our governor in Ohio. So trying to enforce the importance of curating your content and information from the same source is paramount.
Okay, and now Allison, I'll bring you in here because I think what we've heard a lot of this is we talk about all this uncertainty and we hear all of this confusion and trying to find places to give people that one channel to sort of help guide them through what has been a very difficult time. The idea of providing counsel to student athletes has rapidly evolved over the last couple of months. What should we be paying attention to most when it comes to all of this uncertainty and how different it is going to look and feel when students arrive back on campus?
Yeah, a huge question and really important. So I'm really grateful to be here to fill that space. We don't even really know where to start, right? To think about, how to manage the anxiety when we're getting into the unknown. I think that first and foremost, we have to understand that when we're dealing with unknowns, anxiety is appropriate and quite helpful. If you just think about it from a biological standpoint, anxiety allows us to pay attention, right? If I'm running out of the house, that anxiety reminds me to grab my mask. So, first and foremost, I think that when we're thinking about returning back, this idea that we're going to be getting back to some kind of what we were experiencing before, we've got to let go of. And that with the uncertainty is going to bring an arising of, anxiety. In addition to that, no surprise, we've been experiencing grief across the board as well. I think grief has been present since this first started. And I would anticipate it's going to continue because when it comes to health and safety, having to make sacrifices and not maybe doing things that I would normally be doing, grief comes with that, right? And so we have to acknowledge that there is another side of the coin here as we're taking these precautions and doing what we can to take care of ourselves and our community. That is going to bring up distress. It's going to bring up distress.
Yeah. And when we think about a locker room, we think about a team environment, and we typically see student athletes coming from various backgrounds and various experiences. And so many times that team environment really is one of the greatest educational spaces to bring people together. But I know, Maxine, in talking with you before we were recording this, I think we now add a completely different wrinkle to this, is in that how people's experiences through not just the pandemic, but through everything that's going on in this country in terms of social injustice and racial inequality and the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement of the last few months. Arriving back to campus, you're going to have people who have truly been changed by their experiences, and creates a lot of differences in those locker rooms.
Yeah, you said it best. Everyone has had a different experience with the pandemic, with Black Lives Matter and social injustice, and having to really educate themselves on what's going on. And some people haven't had to come in contact with COVID or know anybody that has experienced COVID, and they kind of just look on the news every night and say, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. And then some people have been affected indirectly. They have lost someone that they know to COVID. Somebody that's close to them has lost somebody to COVID, and that's difficult as well. But there are a lot of people who have come toe to toe with COVID, especially myself. They've seen it in their house that somebody, my stepfather, who I love very much, was tested positive. And after, time after time of sending him to the ambulance, him coming back, we took things into our own hands and took him to the hospital where they finally tested him, treated him. And then, I've seen social injustice in the medical system on the fact that the doctors didn't listen to him because they just thought he was, a regular Black man. And it wasn't until, we told them he's a chiropractor, he's a doctor, he feels like something else is not right. They finally, listened to him, and they caught the issue just in time, but to have known that nurses and doctors asked him, how is he still alive? That was tough for me and my family to kind of go through. And I had to stay strong for my family as well. So, you know, a lot of different experiences, and it should teach us that we really have to take this seriously.
Yeah, it's well said, and I think your experience is going to help educate your teammates and your bubble. Pardon the use of the term. I know we don't really know where we need to use that, but you have always sort of had a bubble of teammates before, and now that bubble may need to get tighter, but also use it from an educational standpoint. And this may be a tough question, and I'll bring Susie in on this one, but you could have a locker room with student athletes who view this completely differently, view it as super serious to, it's not a big deal, I'm invincible, I'm a student athlete, I don't know what this is going to sort of do. Like, how do we try and navigate those initial conversations and that initial return? Because people are going to be coming from completely different different experiences within this virus and the rest of the world.
Right. Well, I think it starts with, there are going to be guidelines on our campuses. There's going to be guidelines within the NCAA. And so it starts there. We have to abide those. And that's my workplace. And if the student athletes, if we're going to be together, we have to abide by those guidelines. Beyond that, everyone always has opinions. And you know, I regularly meet with my student athletes one-on-one, and I think we'll start there and just talk individually about how they feel. And then, you know, when I find out what that return to play looks like, and if it's masks, and it's, you know, how we have to be in a bus and how we travel and what we do in a hotel. If we get to that point, let's hope, you know, that we can get there in our world. But that's, you know, all I can go on. I mean, I honestly am working through this every single day myself. And I have a lot of high hopes, but I also have tried to deal with that grief too, that Allison mentioned, and the expectations, and trying to just take it day to day. So that's what I hope I can bring to them. And we've been talking about this whole time. We're going to do this together.
I do want to say that I think, I was just going to say that I think it's very fortunate that we have students like Maxine, both on this panel and actually, you know, in our athletic programs, because Maxine has had firsthand experience with the virus in her family. And to the point that, you know, I think several of us have made, that many students have had the sense that they're invincible. And even if some of them may have actually had the infection, they have maybe had either asymptomatic cases or had very mild cases. But Maxine has had a close relative who was really very ill and has seen the adverse consequences, both from a societal perspective and some of the inequities and the experiences of the disparities of the medical treatments, but also the severity of the illness and how horrific it can be as a disorder. And I think that you can share that, Maxine, with the rest of the student body in a way that oftentimes the rest of us as administrators and adults, much older than your population, sometimes when we talk about the importance of why it is critical to follow these mitigation measures that we've put in place, it sometimes doesn't have the same impact as a fellow student, another student athlete can really share. And so I think you have a really important role to play by sharing with other students why these measures are so important. You know, wearing masks is not a political statement. It's just a measure that protects others and protects yourself. And it allows us to continue to play competitive sports. Right. And that's something that you can share. Yeah. Why do we have social distancing? You know, why do we have these various measures?
And I forgot to mention that, you know, it was extremely hard on my stepdad and my mom because she's taking care of him, but also on my little brother and sister and myself, on the fact that, you know, we had to constantly worry. Like if I even had like a baby cough, I'm like, oh my God, like what's happening? You know, and that is a different kind of anxiety that, you know, I had to kind of double up on because, you know, I'm worried about what's going to happen moving forward with basketball and school. And then I have to worry about my family's health. I live with my grandma. You know, I was separated from my grandmother because I normally live with her. She's 87 years old, and I kind of take care of her. And she was here by herself, and I was over at the house. As soon as my stepdad started showing symptoms, I had to quarantine in my house away from my grandmother, which, you know, was very difficult for me. I'm named after my grandmother, so, you know, me and my grandmother are very tight. And so to be away from her during that time, to not be able to give her hugs, I haven't given my grandmother a hug in months because, you know, I'm going out to physical therapy. I'm, you know, going to the store. I don't want to give even the slightest chance to infecting, you know, my elderly grandmother. And so that's a whole nother different kind of anxiety that, you know, some of us student athletes have had to undergo.
Well, and I think hearing that story, I mean, anybody that comes into contact with you, Maxine, I think the way you've eloquently put it should hopefully have a greater understanding about the social responsibility that everybody should be having as we transition back. But I want to ask Allison quickly, are there tactics or things that can be used to help bridge those gaps if those gaps come up, with whether it's within a team structure or an athletic department structure? From a counseling standpoint, how can you help, you know, to bridge some of those inevitable gaps that you're going to have in understanding within our student populations?
Sure. I mean, I think what we're talking about here is empathy, and to be able to have empathy and understanding means I have to be able to put myself in a position to hear that. And I think the reality is, going back to the anxiety component, to really face what's happening here, we got to own what's up, right? And with that's going to bring some anxiety. So it's easy to just say off the jump that this isn't a big deal and that it's nothing, because I don't have to take that on, right? So I guess what I'm getting at, I think, when I think from a standpoint of tactic, it's looking at somebody in the eyes and talking to them. Right. And I think when we experience maybe individuals that are having a harder time understanding the importance of these protocols, to really have these in-depth conversations, right? Not necessarily just like calling somebody out and cussing them out, right? But really looking at somebody and talking about how that's making, you know, myself feel when I hear kind of some of the things that you're saying. Even just being on this panel with this Horizon League community, I feel comforted and supported. And so when I keep breaking that down and think of, like, you know, my institution and university, and then athletics, and then the team, right? Like, if there's something that we know as athletes and working with athletics and then these universities, it's community. And so I think that's the ticket, and really leaning on, because every one of these student athletes inherently have that within them, right? This greater good.
And it helps us transition, I think, to the final sort of talking point of this panel today. And that is this transition back into a world that we know is going to be incredibly uncertain when it comes to being a student athlete. And this has kind of been an underlying theme of this summer series that I think came about very organically, and we weren't really waiting for, is that the definition of what it means to be a student athlete, the identity of our student athletes, have really truly changed from the time that sports was shut down in March until we hopefully have them starting back up this fall. So I'll go back to Maxine. You've gone through a ton of stuff that someone your age probably shouldn't have gone through at this point in her life in the last couple of months. As you look at yourself, and this may be a really big and difficult question to sort of answer, but how has your definition of being a student athlete changed, or has it, in these last few months?
It definitely has. And to kind of piggyback about, you know, what Coach Susie was saying, you know, us student athletes, like, we're very goal oriented. You know, we do what we do every day at a specific time. You know, we have a schedule. You're on time, never late. You know, that's just our life. And, you know, at first it was nice to have a little break. You know, we're thinking, oh, maybe 2 weeks, you know, we'll be back, you know. And for a full-fledged pandemic to hit was very hard, you know, for me to adjust to that. And I know a lot of my student athletes friends are like, what do I do? Like, especially when the gyms were closed and, you know, we're not able to work on our craft. That was the hardest part. But for me, you know, student athletes, we've always had to hold ourselves to a higher standard. in everything that we do, because we represent our families, we represent our universities, our respective programs and teams, and we represent ourselves. And so, we've always had to lead by example. And I feel like now we have to lead by an even better example. And what I mean by that is, we need to do whatever is necessary to keep ourselves safe and healthy. But not only ourselves, but our friends and our family and those, who we care about. And, when we return to school, we have to continue to do that even more so, because like I said, I would not want to give my grandmother the slightest chance of contracting this virus, or anybody in my family to ever have to go through that again. And so, I would think that we would want to do the same thing for our out of school families, because I know at Detroit Mercy, my team and I, we are a family, and we don't want to put anybody in danger of contracting this nasty virus. And so with that being said, to all the student athletes watching this, I encourage everyone and even challenge everyone to, wear a mask and avoid politicizing these masks, kind of like Madam President was saying. And, keep hand sanitizer in your car every time you go somewhere. Hop in the car, put some hand sanitizer on, making sure we're sanitizing our phones. We're on our phones 24/7. We have to be the example. A lot of people are saying we want college football, we want college basketball back. Well, we can't do that if we're not wearing our masks, if we're not keeping ourselves safe and healthy. And so if we do whatever that we can to ensure that we can have a competitive, safe season, then that would be great. And I think it's our responsibility, and it's something that can be done, and we can do it. We have all the tools in our tool belt to do that as student athletes.
And you've gone from inspiring on the court to trying to inspire off the court so that you can get back on the court. I mean, it's an incredible sort of full circle message when it comes to it. And for those that maybe haven't watched the whole series, the second part of the series dealt predominantly with student athlete identity as it related to not having a team in terms of athletic preparation. Now, this one, I think, Allison, dealing more with transitioning back to school and wondering how you fit back into that athletic community when your worldview has so drastically changed. And while there are many cases where in a normal year, student athletes require counseling to deal with the stress of competition, now we have new stressors that are sort of added onto it. And we've had some really difficult things happen in the last couple of months. You are at an institution where there's already been an announcement of sports that will not continue sort of moving forward. And that changes an athlete's identity moving forward. How will this transition we hope out of these last few months back into student life? What needs to happen as that definition changes? Because all of a sudden life isn't as simple as it once was.
Mm-hmm. I think having an acceptance of that is the front leading, most important, critical part to that, right? To Maxine, to your point, student athletes have a system that they are used to. It functions very, very well. And then it was just completely thrown out the door, right? And it's kind of a similar process, I think, coming back into the return, right? We're used to a certain system, and that's just not going to be what it's going to be, right? So again, kind of coming back into that grief process and understanding. I think from an identity standpoint, there's that absorbing the understanding that too is shifting and what comes with that. I'm noticing it's really common when student athletes are like recognizing those shifts, whether that's due to sleep or like lack of motivation or just like isolating themselves a little bit more, all kinds of things that can come up with that. And then they'll kind of like, oh, why am I feeling this way? Oh, why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should be more motivated. I should this, I should this, I should this, I should this, right? And so I think the big is there's no should, right? You're feeling how you're feeling, meet yourself where you are, right? And then what's next? What is that next step? What is that next thing that you can do that still aligns with your value system, right? Let's not get caught up in the fact that we're not feeling the same as we always do. You shouldn't. We really shouldn't be.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's phenomenal advice. And I hope everybody can, not just student athletes, any student, anybody can take that advice and try and apply it to things that are moving forward. All right, let's kind of fall back based off of that and then get to Tyler about this sort of, it's not logistical in terms of competition, but it's logistical in terms of you're dealing with student athletes who, may not have competition for a while, who don't know where they sort of fit, all these things. And I think so many fans out there and people like me who just show up for the games and enjoy the athletic competition, this is a real opportunity to learn and understand about all of the operational support behind the scenes for student athletes as just people. What has this done to then maybe change or help departments work with student athletes even more, because competition is kind of in the air and uncertain?
That's a great question and a tremendous challenge for us. I think it's really given us a moment of pause to really focus on professional development with our student athletes and engagement, right? So the conversation may have shifted from preparation for season, or how are we preparing our young people for life after sport, right? So we really use this time to focus our student athletes on life after sport, professional development, social and emotional development, having some very healthy conversations with our student athletes. That's been our pivot and focus during this time.
And as a former student athlete too, how do you reflect on your experience and now understanding, getting out the broader picture of what competition and being a student athlete meant to you to sort of help bridge that understanding to, I would imagine, some frustrated 18, 19, 20-year-olds who want to know what the heck's going on right now?
I think that kind of speaks to the building the trust piece, right, for our student athletes. And they want us to be present, right? So from a coach's perspective, a presidential perspective, an administrative perspective, our student athletes are yearning for those folks being present in the conversation. So on our end, we've been diligent in making sure that we're available to answer whatever questions that our student athletes may have, even parents. So being present during this time is extremely important because of the uncertainty.
And Susie, how do you feel like you're adapting as a leader? I mean, you've been doing this for a while as a coach, and now all of a sudden being a leader of this program is totally changed in 2020. How are you adapting? How do you think your peers are needing to adapt at this time?
Well, I think one of the really, when you coach, you're just used to being around a lot of people and every day touching a lot of lives and touching and getting a lot out of that myself. So I've had to adapt there immensely, but I have kept in touch with my team very regularly. And, I think in leaders, to be a real person and kind of let them understand how I'm doing also through this, and having, a very great understanding from the beginning. That's a very easy thing for me to do because that's how I am, but that's what I've been doing with them. I am a parent of high schoolers who do play sports, and sports an enormous part of our family's life. So that has been really difficult for all of us, and not minimizing sports. This is a health, a crisis, but this is such a big part of these student athletes' lives. Their whole lives have been built up to this moment. So having a lot of empathy there, and also trying to just help them gauge what this is, staying safe. Are you okay? Checking in regularly. And really is it increase the culture among our team, our leaders, I'm very proud of. And that's one thing that I've been able to do, and really I'm glad that I could empower our leaders of the team, because they really had the power and the control over this. As coaches in the NCAA, the rules were very much stripped from what we could do. So the biggest thing we could do is support and talk about life in school. So that's what we've done. And so I think I think when we all get back together, I think we're going to be stronger. I think every student athlete's going to have a lot of strength they didn't know they had. And, there's going to be something positive out of this.
Yeah, to kind of put a bow on a lot of stuff we've talked about and hearing from Susie and Tyler and everybody here, is that there are places where you are expected and need to go and find that point of contact. And these universities and athletic departments are opening themselves up to communicate. And if you haven't had that communication and you happen to be stumbling across this, make that call to your coach or to your faculty advisor or your administrative rep or whoever it might be, and try and find that point of contact to help sort of weather through this in case you haven't been getting those messages. And then I do want to bring Allison in really quickly too, because we talked about this in series 2, and I want to bring it up again in series 3, is that access to counseling has never been easier too for student athletes wherever they might be. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as this all shifted, we immediately went to remote services. And so we have not missed a beat. We are still providing services, whether that's via phone or via video. I don't know specifics on what every university is doing, but certainly there's been a lot of flexibility across state lines in being able to provide services, things that we could not do before, we are able to do now. So if you are experiencing any kind of challenge from a standpoint of mental health, which you are, right? We all are, know that that's a resource for you, right? Know that that's a resource for you. I would encourage most, if any, to go to your coaches, go to your athletic trainers. If you don't have an idea of where to start with that, because chances are there's a service that you can fall into.
Yeah, it's great. And I'll leave the final word for President Peskovich, because I think when we look at this uncertainty, there's students from near and far that are wondering, what is everything going to sort of look like? So if there's a final sort of message to our student athletes hoping to return soon from everything that we've heard today, what would your parting wisdom be for us?
Well, I think the most important message is that we want you to come to our schools and to be on our campuses and to be competitive and to have a great experience. And I love what Tyler said about we are preparing you not only for a great college experience, but for a great life's experience. And that really is what you're going to get when you come to one of our universities. And so that is really what we're hoping for. And I think that all of us have to work hard to make sure, extra hard this year, to make sure that that happens. At Oakland, for example, many of our student athletes are already coming back. They're on campus. And I think that's a great example that our student athletes are in the lead. And they have always been in the lead. They're among some of our best prepared academically. And they, I think, are terrific role models for so many other students. And Maxine is a great example of that. She's a terrific role model in so many ways. She's articulate. She's a great athlete. She's a great role model for values. And that's what we see in so many other student athletes. So you're a great example of the kind of student athletes that we love to see representing other student athletes. So what I think the year holds is going to be certainly filled with special challenges, but at the same time, those are challenges that will stick with all of you as students for the rest of your lives. And those are also challenges that will serve as opportunities. And these opportunities are ones that I think will build resilience and diligence, and they will serve you well for the rest of your lives. And so we're looking forward to a terrific year, both from an academic and from an athletic perspective. And I wish all of you great experiences and a wonderful year.
Well said.
Well said. We're so privileged to have just tremendous leadership top down. So from our presidents to our wraparound services as Allison and our head coaches and our student athletes, we are fortunate and privileged to be a member of this league. And I am just so inspired by this panel. So just thank you so much. I'm privileged to be here. I'm so proud of all of you and what you're doing in your campuses. This is a phenomenal conversation. So thank you.
And hopefully it helps somebody who's out there listening who maybe was uncertain or was feeling a little anxious or didn't even know where they needed to be directed. And I think I speak for all of us on this panel when I say, do whatever you can to stay as safe as possible, have empathy for those around you, and hopefully we can all celebrate by coming together in competition very, very soon. Thank you so much to our great panel. Thank you, guys. And this concludes our summer 3-part series. And we hope to be talking to you in a more normalized athletic sort of way soon. If not, stay so safe. And we will talk to you next time. Thank you.